Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaskar. Welcome back to lecture number 2 on the Indian Stamp Act 1899. We will continue our discussion on Indian Stamp Act. Let us see what we will discuss in this lecture. We'll discuss valuation of duty, section 20 to 28, chapter 3, adjudication as to stamp duty. Then we'll see what happened if the instruments they are not duly stamped, and what happens if there is stamps are misused, and finally we'll see the criminal offences and procedure under chapter 7, section 62 to 71 deal with that. Let us begin. Now, valuation of duty in chapter number 2, Indian Stamp Act, it deal under section 20 to 28. Section 20 is very important, which discuss about the conversion of amount expressed in foreign currency. So now what happened if where an instrument is charged with ad valorem duty in respect of a money expressed in any currency rather than the Indian currency. Now if any instrument which is chargeable with ad valorem fees and the money which is expressed in that instrument is foreign currency, then the stamp duty shall be calculated on the value of such money in currency of India according to the current rate of exchange on the date of the instrument. So central government may from time to time by notification in the official gazette they prescribe what is the rate of exchange for the conversion of the British or any foreign currency into the Indian currency for the purpose of calculating the stamp duty for the instrument here executed here in India. See, if a document mention an amount in a foreign currency and is chargeable with ad valorem duty, then the stamp duty is calculated in Indian rupees only. It is not in the foreign currency. So what we are supposed to do now, that foreign currency need to be converted into Indian currency, and now the stamp duty will be chargeable on the Indian currency only. So the current rate of that on that instrument that will be used, and as we already read this in this provision that it is time to time notified by the government. So let us take one example here. For example, there is one agreement which is signed in Paris on 1st of August and mention the $10,000. So this is agreement, mention consideration $10,000. Now, if the exchange rate on 1st of August is 90 rupees per dollar, then the Indian value is for $10,000, it is 9 lakh rupees. And the stamp duty is calculated on 9 lakh rupees, not on the $10,000. It is calculated on 9 lakh rupees. And that's why the provision said that the foreign currency will be converted into Indian currency and on the exchange rate which is specified by the government, and on the basis of that the stamp duty is chargeable on the amount which is converted into Indian currency. So with the help of this example we understand that now the stamp duty is calculated on 9 lakh rupees. Moving further, when you see section 21, this talk about valuation of stock and marketable securities. If we give a reading to this provision section 21 into your Bear Act, we'll see that it is mentioned that the stamp duty depend on the value of the stock or security. It is based on the market value or average price on the date of instrument. So on the date of instrument, what was the market value of that particular share per share? On the basis of that, the stamp duty will be chargeable. Now, in the example on your slide, you can see that a share transfer deed is dated 10th of July and it involved 1000 share of XYZ Limited company. Now, if each share is trading on that particular day on 10th July, is the value of one share is rupees 150. Now, the value of 1000 share is 1,50,000 and stamp duty chargeable is on 1,50,000 only. So, this is how section 21 said valuation of the stock and market value security is, will take it average on the price on the date of the instrument. So, this transfer deed is made on 10th of July, and because on 10th of July, each share is trading at the price of 150 rupees. So on 10th July, the price of the share is 150 rupees. So 1000 share is there. So this is total value of the 1000 share is 1,50,000 and stamp duty will be levied on the 1,50,000 rupees only. Now, what is there in section 22? Section 22 discusses the effect of statement of rate or price. Now, if the instrument state that exchange rate or average price and stamp duty is paid accordingly, the instrument is presumed to be duly stamped unless otherwise is proved by the other party. Now, take one example. A contract mention that $1 is equal to 84 rupees and it is stamped on that basis. But later, someone proved that this rate was wrong. Maybe the rate was $1 on that particular day when that instrument deed was made. It was 90 rupees, not 84 rupees. And if it is proved, then the document is presumed to be not valid. But if it is proved right, then the document is presumed validly stamped. Unless the rate was proved wrong, the document considered to be valid. Section 23 discuss instrument reserving interest. Instrument reserving interest. Now, take one example that there is a loan deed of 5 lakh rupees and it is mentioned that this loan deed for 5 lakh rupees is on the interest of 10%. Now, if it is so, the provisions of section 23 said document mention interest to be paid 8% per annum on a loan. It will not increase the stamp duty. What does it mean? That a loan deed, as I said, of a 50,000, mention interest, suppose 10,000, stamp duty is still paid on the 5 lakh. I'm sorry, I said a loan deed for a 5 lakh, mention interest at 10%, stamp duty is still paid on 5 lakh rupees. So what does it mean? That interest does not become a part of the total amount. So the stamp duty is still chargeable on the 5 lakh rupees only. So 10% interest is not added on the total amount on which the stamp duty is become chargeable. Section 24, it discusses what if there is a transfer in consideration of debt or subject to future payment. So, when a property is transferred wholly or partly in exchange of a debt owed or transferred subject to future payment or obligation, whether it is for definite time or for contingent, then the debt or obligation included any charge, encumbrances or mortgages is treated as a part of the sale consideration. Now this is important that we said that the provision said that debt or obligation is treated as a part of the sale consideration, means that debt is considered as the consideration for that sale and stamp duty is charged accordingly on that amount. So it means cash plus debt plus other liabilities. Now take one example. Let us see that debt is a part of the consideration. So this debt is part of consideration. Now for example, here is one Mr. A. He owes 10 lakh to Mr. B, and instead of repaying this to Mr. B, Mr. A said, okay Mr. B, you take my land which is worth of 10 lakh rupees, and he did this with the full settlement. So A owed 10 lakh rupees to Mr. B. Instead of repaying that 10 lakh rupees to Mr. B, A said, we settle this matter. I'll give you my land. I'll transfer my rights on my land to you, and then we'll settle this debt. Now, there is no cash exchange between A and B, right? There is no cash exchange. So stamp duty will be charged as if the land is sold for the rupees 10 lakh. Reason is existing debt become a part of the sale consideration as it is mentioned in section 24. So this debt, it become a part of the sale consideration. Now, I think this example make you understand that sometime the consideration is not paid, but the debt become the consideration itself, and now the stamp duty will be paid that actually land is sold by A to B for the price of 10 lakh rupees. Moving further, section 5, we'll see this is a very important provision in this chapter. Valuation in case of annuity or periodic payment. Now, let us see annuity or periodic payment. So, when an instrument is executed for what? Either to secure the payment of annuity or for any other periodic sum, or whether the consideration for a conveyance is an annuity or other periodic payment, then for the purpose of levying stamp duty, the value shall be assessed. How we will assess the value? So for clause A is concerned, secure the payment for an annuity. Now for clause A, for a fixed or a definite period. Now the time period is fixed here. Add up all the payment for that period. So whatever the time period fixed here, for that period we will add all the payments. Clause B said for perpetual or for indefinite time period. Now the time period is not fixed. It is perpetual, mean for the continuous time period, not ending with even person's life. And if it is so, for perpetual or for indefinite time period, this will be 20 years of payment. So stamp duty will be, we will calculate with the 20 years of payment. And clause C said indefinite but linked to a person life. Though it is indefinite, but then it is linked to the person life. And if it is so, if this is the case, then value will be 12 years of the payment. 12 years of the payment. Now let us understand this one by one. You can see the example for this clause A. So in clause A, we see that time period was definite there. So now here Mr. A gives Mr. B a deed stating that he will pay 1 lakh annually for 10 years. Now the time period is fixed. How much? 10 years. So he will pay 1 lakh annually for 10 years. So total payment 1 lakh multiplied by 10, it is 10 lakh rupees. So stamp duty is charged on 10 lakh rupees. That is the total ascertainable sum which is given here for clause A. But clause B said perpetual or for an unspecified time not tied to the anyone's death. So a trust deed promises to pay 50,000 annually forever to a temple, right? A trust is ready to pay 50,000 rupees annually to a temple, and this is a trust deed. Now the stamp duty is calculated. This is perpetual, this is continuous. So this trust will continue pay this fee for indefinite time period for this temple. So stamp duty is calculated for 20 years only. Now value is 50,000 multiplied by 20, it will be 10 lakh, and stamp duty is levied on 10 lakh rupees. So clause C now discuss indefinite period linked to a life. Let us take one example. A promises to pay 80,000 per year to Mr. B for as long as Mr. B is alive. A promises, I will pay you 80,000 rupees till your lifetime. Now since it is connected with the lifetime of Mr. B, so we assume the payment for 12 years, and now that value of 80,000 will be multiplied by 12, it will become 9,60,000, and then the stamp duty is on 9,60,000 rupees only. Section 26, stamps where value of subject matter is indeterminate. Now this is important, the value is indeterminate. So the provision is that if the exact value or amount which is involved in an instrument cannot be determined at the time of execution. So what does it mean? That when the instrument is executed, at that point of a time, the value of that subject matter, it was not evaluate or it is not determined. Now, then the maximum claimable amount under the instrument is limited to what the stamp fixed on it could cover at the time of its execution. Now, I have just given you the crux of section 26. You can give a reading to the whole provision of section 26 into your bare act. I'll give you one example here. See, if a mining lease is executed in 2020 without knowing what is the future royalty of this, and government estimated, let it be the 1 lakh per year. So the stamp duty is paid on that 1 lakh per year. This later, the royalty turned out to be 2 lakh per year. But still, the stamp duty which is paid on 1 lakh, it will remain valid, and no further stamp duty is required to pay on that extra 1 lakh rupees, because later royalty turned from 1 lakh to 10 lakh rupees, because 1 lakh was simply the estimate of the government that it may be 1 lakh rupees. Now let us see section 28, directions as to the duty in case of certain conveyance. Now this section provide guidelines for calculating the stamp duty in cases where the property is sold to one or more person and the mode of conveyance varies, such as conveyance in parts, resale before actual conveyance, direct conveyance to sub-purchasers, and multiple deeds involving original and intermediate buyers. Let us understand this. See, for example, a piece of land is sold to Mr. X for 1 crore rupees. A piece of land sold to Mr. X for the consideration 1 crore rupees. Now, instead of one sale deed, the land is conveyed in 3 parts. That is, this piece of land is sold to Mr. X for 1 crore, but this land is conveyed in 3 parts. That is by 3 separate instruments. So each sale deed show its respective portion of consideration, maybe 30 lakhs, again 30 lakhs or 40 lakhs, like this. So each instrument is charged separately. Now, based on the consideration which is shown in that instrument, provided that consideration is clearly mentioned on each part. Now take one more example for this. For example, Mr. A and Mr. B, they buy a property together for 50 lakh rupees, right? So A and B, they bought flat, A on a first floor, B on a second floor. They bought this building together in respective share, that I will be there on a ground floor and you will stay there on the first floor. So A and B buy a property together, price of the property 50 lakhs. Later Mr. A gets a deed of 60% share. So he has the 60% area of this property and we'll get another of a 40% though. So stamp duty rule is each conveyance is charged on the ad valorem, that is based on the value. So A will pay for the 60% share in that property and B will pay on the 40% share on that property. So the stamp duty will be paid individually for their individual deed. Now chapter number 3, it discusses with adjudication as to stamp duties. Section 31 and section 32 deal with the adjudication as to the stamp duty. See, section 31 said adjudication as to the proper stamp. So if any person is not sure about duty payable on any instrument, he is not sure how much he has to be paid, then he can apply to the collector of stamps for his opinion regarding the duty payable, because he is not aware, he is not sure that how much stamp duty is chargeable on that particular instrument. So what he will do, he will file an application, he will make this application with a fee of ₹5 to the office of collector of stamp. Okay. Now when he file this application, then this application is attached with certain documents, and these documents like abstract of the instrument he will attach, one affidavit is required to be there, and other evidences as may be required by the collector. And with this, he has to be pay fees, as we already discussed that a fee, such application has to be made with the fee of ₹5. So when a person he want to know that what actually or exact fees he has to be pay on that particular instrument, for that this is the procedure. So section 31 said that you have to be apply by an application, you have to be pay fee of rupees 5, and then with that application he has to be attached one affidavit, the abstract of the instrument, and any other evidence which the collector required or he want to assure for in respect of that instrument, and then the fees he has to be paid. Now let us take one example for this also. Suppose you are drafting a partnership deed and you are not sure that what is the correct stamp duty before executing it. Now what you did? As per the provision of section 31, you can take the draft deed to the collector and you pay the adjudication fees for that, submit the abstract, the necessary documents, and then the collector will tell you that what will be the exact stamp duty which is required, and in that way it will also helpful for the individual to avoid the understamping, and in case if there is overstamping, then that will be refunded back by the office of the collector. But yes, it will certainly avoid the understamping of the instrument. Now what is section 32? It discusses about that when the collector will issue the certificate. Now this section is basically the follow-up to section 31. After the adjudication, now the proper stamp duty, the collector issue a certificate. So what does it mean? That document after the adjudication is done in section 31, and now the person know that how much fees he has to be paid or chargeable on that particular instrument. Now exactly he paid that fees on stamp duty on that instrument. Now if once it done, now the next step is under section 32, the collector issue a certificate or endorsement confirming that the duty status of the instrument. Now what he confirmed here? He confirmed here that duty is actually paid, and once all the formalities regarding the instrument is done, we can say only after that this certificate is issued by the collector. Now see what is the key provision for this. When certificate is issued, when now the collector issues the certificate, if the collector believe that an instrument is chargeable with duty and either it is already fully stamped or the required duty as determined under section 31 has been paid, he shall endorse the instrument with a certificate. Now he will issue a certificate, and what he endorse on that certificate is that full stamp duty, whatever is on that instrument, has been paid. Now situation if duty is not chargeable. Now if the instrument is not chargeable with duty, then collector will endorse. He will write on the face of that document, not chargeable with the duty. Now we will see that what is the effect of this certificate. Now what is the effect of this certificate? Subsection 3 deal with this particular point, that once such certificate or you can say the endorsement is made, the instrument is considered duly stamped. We discussed this definition, what is duly stamped. So once certificate or endorsement is made, now the instrument is considered duly stamped or not chargeable as applicable, whatever is applicable. So that will be mentioned on the certificate, and certificate is issued by the collectors. And now this certificate is admissible in evidence. This certificate is having legal value. This certificate is now capable for registration under the Registration Act, and it is also valuable for the other legal processes, as though it had been originally stamped correctly. So this is the way once the document is legally approved by the collector and he issued the certificate, now after that this document, this instrument, it has admissible as an evidence. It is valid in the eye of law. It is capable for the registration under the Registration Act. Moving further, we'll take one example for this. Suppose Mr. A, he presented draft partition deed to the collector under section 31. Now at this point of time, he is not sure that how much stamp duty chargeable for this partnership deed. collector determined the duty as 500 rupees. Now Mr. A, he pays 500 rupees. So the moment when this 500 rupees is paid, now collector endorsed full stamp duty of 500 paid. He endorsed on the document full stamp duty of 500 paid. Now this instrument can be used in court for registered, enforced legally, and it become valid as if it were originally and properly stamped. Further, chapter number 4 of the Act deal instruments not duly stamped. Section 33 to 48 deal with what if the instruments are not duly stamped. So till now we discussed that when document is duly stamped, how and at what point of a time the collector issued a certificate that the instrument is duly stamped, and he issued the certificate. Now we'll see the another part of the story. Now what if the document is not duly stamped? What are the consequences when the document is not duly stamped? Section 33 to 48, the Indian Stamp Act 1899 deal with this important aspect. See, section 33 said examination and impounding of instrument. If any instrument is not duly stamped, then it can be impounded under this section by arbitrator, court, public officer, excluding the police officer. Exclude this. Not by him. Okay. Impounded, seized by. This document is impounded under this section. Who can impound this? Arbitrator, court, or any public officer. But section 33 said this any public officer will not include any police officer. Now such instrument has to be impounded before it is accepted as evidence. Now we will discuss this further, that this instrument has to be impounded, that it has to be seized before this document is accepted as a evidence. And the object of this section is to protect the revenue of the government. Now we have one exception, the proviso we have for this. A magistrate or a criminal court judge is not required to examine or impound the instrument unless the case fall under chapter 12, investigation of offences, or under chapter 36, miscellaneous provision for inquiry, trial of the CRPC. Now it covers under BNSS. Second is, a judge of a high court may delegate this duty to a appointed officer. I want to take this exception proviso A. A magistrate or criminal court judge is not required to examine or impound the instrument unless the case fall under chapter 12. So if the magistrate or criminal court judge, he is not required to examine or impound. He cannot seize the instrument unless it fall under chapter 12 or under chapter 36 of the CRPC. A judge of a high court may delegate this duty to an appointed officer. These are the second proviso. Now we'll take example for this. Suppose a sub-registrar, he receive a sale deed and that appear under stamped during the registration process. Okay. So this sale deed executed by the party, right? And it is properly stamped. But at the time of registration, sub-registrar found that this sale deed is understamped understamped. Now what he is supposed to do? He is bound to impound the document under this section. He cannot ignore it and proceed to register. Now this is very important. He is bound to impound. He has to be seized this document, right? Otherwise, it will definitely directly affect the revenue of the state, revenue of the government. So, in contrast, if a criminal court judge, he see a bond paper and that appear unstamped during a bail hearing, he need not to impound that paper unless the matter the case fall under chapter 12 or chapter 36 of the CRPC. Moving further, section 34 discuss impounding of unstamped receipts. Unstamped receipts. Now you see, section 33, it discuss impounding of instruments. 33 discuss impounding of instruments. 34 discuss impounding of receipt. So unstamped receipts can be impounded by a public accountant, or he may require the receipt to be stamped. So this is a provision which is apply only to receipt that are chargeable with a duty, but this duty is not exceeding 10 naya paisa. This is a very nominal duty or stamp duty, I would say. So and it is produced before a government officer during the audit of any public account. I'm sure you understand this with the help of this example. Now see, suppose a receipt of rupees 500 cash given by a person to the government department, and this is unstamped and get produced during the audit. So a receipt of 500 cash was given by a person, and he gives this to the government department, but this receipt is unstamped and it produced during the audit. Now as per section 34, audit officer can choose not to impound the receipt. Okay, he can choose not to impound. He will not seize it. Instead, he may ask for a new receipt. Now this new receipt is maybe the properly stamped as per the law, even if the stamp duty is just a few paisa or maybe the 10 naya paisa. But if you want, he choose not to be impound that receipt, but he asks that okay, you bring a new receipt, and on that new receipt that should be duly stamped. Section 35 discuss the instruments not duly stamped inadmissible in evidence. Now this is a very important section from the examination point of view also, and from the other competitive examination point of view also. Section 35 discuss instrument. Now what if instrument is not duly stamped? It become inadmissible as an evidence, etc. Now this section lay down a very strict rule. If it is not duly stamped, not admissible as in evidence. So no document chargeable with stamp duty can be admitted in evidence, acted upon, registered, authenticated unless it is duly stamped. No document chargeable with the stamp duty, if the stamp duty is not chargeable on that document has no legal validity. That document cannot be registered. That document has no authenticity. That document cannot be admitted in the court of law as an evidence. So what is the general rule? The rule is that if an instrument is not duly stamped, it is not admissible in court. It cannot be registered. It cannot be used as evidence, and it cannot be authenticated by any public authority. However, if proper stamp duty and penalty are paid, now the moment when the person realizes that it is not properly stamped, and once it get properly stamped and the penalty is paid, then all these shortcomings waive off, and then document become valid. But then there are certain exceptions and relaxations in this proviso of this section. Clause A said, a document may still be admitted in evidence if the required duty and penalty is paid. So duty shortfall plus penalty, 5 rupees or 10 times the deficient duty, whichever is greater, that need to be paid. Clause B, an unstamped receipt may be admitted against the person who gave it if a stamped receipt could have been demanded from them and the person tendering it 1 rupees penalty. So this is very nominal amount. The penalty is only 1 rupees. Now clause C, if a contract is formed through letters, if a contract is formed through letter and at least one letter is stamped, among these 4 or 5 through letters, one letter is stamped properly, then entire contract is considered as a duly stamped. So the requirement is that only one letter, if only one letter is duly stamped, the entire contract, the entire document is considered as a duly stamped. Clause D said, in criminal proceedings other than the chapter 1236, unstamped instrument can be admitted. In criminal proceedings, now this is exception proviso said that in criminal proceeding, even if an unstamped document instrument, it can be admitted. Clause E said no restrictions on admissibility of instrument when it is executed by the government. There is no restriction now. No restriction on admissibility means the document, that means the instrument is admissible as an evidence if it is executed by the government or if it is certified by the collector under section 32 or other sections of the act. So this is section 35. Instruments, when they are not duly stamped, we said they are inadmissible in evidence. Further, we'll take few examples. Say a sale deed unstamped. If a sale deed is unstamped, it cannot be admitted in evidence in civil suit unless proper duty plus penalty is paid. Unstamped rent receipt cannot be admitted against the person who gave it with 1 rupees penalty. Correspondence contract, 3 letters from the contract, one has proper stamp, whole contract will become valid in that situation. FIR based on an unstamped promissory note, it will be admissible in criminal case. We know that it does not cover chapter 12, chapter 36 of CRPC. Now we'll see a few examples for this. If a contract should have 20 rupees stamp duty, contract should have 20 rupees stamp duty, but how much stamp duty has been paid for that? Only 10 rupees has been paid. Out of 20, only 10 rupees has been paid. How much amount supposed to be paid? 10 more. So deficiency is of a 10 rupees. Now what will be the penalty? It is mentioned there. Penalty is 10 multiplied by 10. It is rupees 100. Since it exceed rupees 5 and hence 100 rupees has to be paid. So total amount will be rupees 10 duty and 100 penalty. It will become rupees 110. Now see section 36, admissibility of instruments where not to be questioned. Admission of instrument where not to be questioned, where you cannot question the admission of instrument. Let us give a reading to provision. When a document or instrument has already been admitted in evidence by the court, that document which has already been admitted by the court as an evidence, then its admissibility cannot later be challenged, and in the same case on the ground that it was not duly stamped. And that's why the officer has to be cautious when he entertain that document, that instrument. So once the instrument is admissible, when the instrument is admitted as an evidence, later its admissibility cannot be challenged. So in the same case on the ground that it was not duly stamped, except in situation provided under section 61 of the Indian Stamp Act. We will cover that later. Now what are the important points so far as section 36 is concerned? Finality of admission. So once the court admit a document in evidence, once court admit a document in evidence, its stamps duty defect cannot be used to challenge its admissibility in the same suit for the proceedings. That need to be take care in the initial time. So once it is admitted, its admissibility cannot be challenged at the later stage in the same suit. The second point is This is exception. Section 61 said if the matter is referred to the High Court under Section 61, then it can be examined whether the document was properly stamped or not, right? This is the exception. Third, no retrospective objection. So even if a document is admitted by mistake, means the parties cannot raise objection later on the basis of being unstamped or insufficient stamps. Once it is admitted, it is admitted. It may be because of mistake, or maybe because that point of a time no one has taken this understamped document instrument into consideration, that the stamp duty is not paid, proper stamp duty is not paid. Once it is admitted, you cannot raise any objection on that. Then applies to the same suit only. So this protection apply only to the current case in which the document was admitted. But in a different suit, admissibility can be challenged. It can be questioned. If the same instrument is used in some other case, then at that point of a time, that admissibility can be challenged, that the document is not duly stamped. We have one case of Javer Chand versus Pukhraj Surana, All India Reporter 1961, Supreme Court 1655. The Supreme Court held in this case that once an instrument is admitted in evidence, its admissibility cannot be questioned later in the same proceeding, even if the court erred. So it may be the error on the side of a court, but once it is admitted, it is admitted. And the Honorable Supreme Court said, instrument admitted as an evidence is admitted. It cannot be questioned. Although it may be the error on the side of a court, you cannot challenge it. So let's say in a civil suit, a sale deed was admitted in an evidence without objection. A sales deed in a civil suit was admitted in evidence without any objection. But later, the opposite party realized that the sale deed was not properly stamped, or it is not duly stamped. If it is so, it cannot be. The opposite party cannot challenge this, right? Once it is admitted, it is admitted. Now we'll see section 35 and 36. See, 35, it bar on admission of unstamped instrument, right? It bar on admission of unstamped instrument. But section 36 said, once this instrument is admitted, it cannot be questioned. I'm sure this will help you to understand more clearly that section 35 and section 36, how they are different and how they are connected to each other. 5, put a bar on admission of unstamped instrument. Now, this is the initial stage where the document need to be rechecked, that whether it is stamped properly or not. If it is unstamped, it need to be stamped properly. But 36 said, okay, it is not stamped properly, but once it is admitted, it cannot be questioned later. So section 35, this document may be admitted on a payment of duty plus penalty. Means it can become admitted, it can become valid laterly once the stamp duty is paid and penalty is also paid. And here in section 36, even if the stamp defect exists, objection is barred. You cannot object it now at this stage, though the defect exists there, that it is not duly stamped. Now, section 37, it discussed what happens if there is admission of improperly stamped instrument. This section empowers the state government to make certain rules that allow an instrument that has the correct amount of stamp duty, but the wrong type description of stamp. So this is possible, to be certified as a duly stamped upon the payment of a proper duty. Sometimes it happens that the duly stamped, sometimes it happens once certified, it is considered duly stamped from the date of its execution. Let me explain this with the help of this illustration. A person executed a lease deed worth 1,000 duty using court fees stamp. So what section 37 said? Admission of improperly stamped instrument. So instrument is supposed to be chargeable with the stamp duty, but document is charged with the court fees stamps instead of non-judicial stamp paper. Okay, so a person executed a sale deed worth of rupees 1000 duty using court fee stamp instead of non-judicial stamp paper, that is impressed stamp. Now what happened? So 1000 worth of stamp duty is paid. He has already paid that 1000, although he paid that in a court fee stamp. He paid that in a court fee stamp, but 1000 rupees revenue is already given to the government. So the 1000 worth of a stamp duty is paid. The wrong kind of stamp is used in this case, and section 37 accordingly, the state government rules may allow that person to pay the correct duty again and get a certificate. So once certified, the document is deemed validly stamped from the date of signing. So section 37 provide a practical relief mechanism where there is a mistake in the type of stamp. It can be further rectified, but the one thing which need to be proved here is it was not done intentionally. So the no intention to evade the duty was there. Then section 41 discuss what if instrument unduly stamped by accident, means not intentional, it was by accident. So the section allow voluntarily correction of stamp duty error. So now the person who by mistake or unknowingly, if he stamped a document and when later he realized that it was by mistake or maybe because of some ignorance he has put some that stamp, he can correct that later. Now we have to see that at what point of time and where he can mend or correct his mistake. See, when a person realize and admit that document is not duly stamped, right? This particular provision is talking about the voluntarily correction on the stamp duty. So person realize and admit that document is not duly stamped and he bring it voluntarily before the collector. The time slot is within the 1 year of the execution. So within the time slot of 1 year of execution, he realized the document is not duly stamped and hence he brought that document voluntarily in the office of the collector of revenue. So and then he explained that mistake occurred due to accident or mistake or urgent necessity and offers to pay the proper duty or shortfall. So if we admit that it was not intentional, it may be because of some necessity, some ignorance, may be because of some mistake. If we accept this thing, then collector may accept the duty and regularize the instrument without penalty. But then he has to be proved that this was not intentional, and that's why I myself appear before the office of the collector to make corrections and make the stamp duty, give the proper stamp duty. Now, by passing the strict provision under section 33 and 34, that when we talk about that what happened if the document is not duly stamped. So here there is a kind of a relaxation to the person if he voluntarily appear in the office of the collector for the same to make some changes when the stamp is unduly stamped, document is unduly stamped. Now see example, a partnership deed requiring stamp duty of 2000. Partnership deed requires stamp duty 2000 rupees and it was mistakenly executed on 500 stamp paper. Requirement is of a 2000, mistakenly executed for 500 stamp paper. Now within 6 months, within 6 months, partners voluntarily approached to the collector and then they explained the error happened maybe because of some urgency during a hospital urgency, whatever was the reason, but that reason need to be genuine and correct. Then they offer to pay 1500 shortfall because they the already stamp paper was of a 500, so 1500 they are supposed to be pay more. So if they pay 1500 and if the collector is satisfied that satisfied with the reason they given that it is because of the mistake, then he may accept the amount and regularize the deed without any penalty. So this is purely the discretion of the collector for the same. Now section 43 and prosecution for offences against the stamp law. This section state paying a penalty or going through a stamp duty proceeding does not stop a criminal prosecution under stamp law. However, prosecution will be allowed only if the collector believe offense was done with the intentional to evade the stamp duty. Now, just a few seconds back, we discussed that if the collector satisfied, he may accept the amount, regularize the deed without penalty. But here, if collector believe offense was done with the intention to evade stamp duty, let us see one example. A person execute a sale deed on a stamp paper, rupees 100 instead of 1000. Difference is 900 rupees. Now deficiency is caught and he pay the remaining 900 duty and penalty also. Now, if a mistake was genuine and due to ignorance, the case ends with the penalty only. But if a false stamps were used or there was intentional undervaluation, then collector can order prosecution even after the penalty is paid. Now, this is important. This is important. See, he already take the penalty from the person, and with that, he also given an order for the prosecution. The two main ingredients for this case B is false stamp were used intentionally, and this intentionally false is done for the undervaluation of the stamp. Now, recovery of duties and penalties. So, all duties, penalties, other sums required to be paid under this chapter, it may be recovered by the collector. How he will recover this? He may be recovered this either by distress and sale of the movable property by the person from whom same are due, or by any other process for the time being in force for the recovery of areas of the land and revenue. Now, let me explain this. A person execute a conveyance deed and underpay stamp duty. Collector demand 10,000 as a duty and penalty. Person failed to pay that 10,000 rupees duty and penalty. So, collector may seize and auction his movable property. Maybe the collector seizes his vehicle or maybe any machine, movable property, movable item. So, if that movable item is seized and auctioned by the collector, the amount of 10,000 rupees will be recovered by selling that vehicle or the machines. So, this proceed like that he would for land revenue recovery under the Revenue Recovery Act, and the collector will receive proceed like he is recovering for the land revenue in this case. Now see the flow chart for this. If there is unpaid duty or penalty, collector issue a notice for same. Now even after issuing the notice, the person has not paid in the time. Now he has the two options in this at that point of a time. Now see, what if there is stamps are misused? Section 52 allows for misuse stamp. This section provides a remedy when a person accidentally misuse a stamp or use it in a non-chargeable cases. So, collector can cancel the wrong use stamp and allow a refund for the same. A proper application need to be made within a time period of 6 months. So, to discuss that when this misuse stamps allowances is given to the person, if that person accidentally misuses a stamp. So, the instrument is re-stamped correctly. If the duty was payable, then the instrument will again be re-stamped. Now see section 52 when it apply. If wrong stamp used inadvertently, rupees 100 stamp used instead of rupees 10 revenue stamp, and it is used where non-judicial required stamp used for a non-chargeable document. Now, stamp rendered useless under section 15 due to violation of section 13, then more than one instrument improperly written or same stamp paper or making it invalid. 53 discuss the allowances for spoiled or misused stamp, how to be made. So, if any case in which the allowances is made for the spoiled or misused stamp, then the collector may give in lieu of that other stamps or the stamp description or the value, and if he thinks fit, stamps for any other description to the same amount in value, or this is again his discretion that same value in the money may be given to the person, or at that value he deduct 10 new paisa in every rupee for the fraction of a rupee. See one example. A person used 50 rupees non-judicial stamp paper where 10 rupees stamp paper was required. If it qualify under section 52, misuse the stamp, then the person can apply under section 53 for the same. And he go back, rupees 50 non-judicial stamp paper, request different type of stamp paper, clause B, get a cash refund, 50 minus 5 service deduction as per clause C. 54 section discuss about the allowances for stamp not required for use. So it allow a person to refund unused and unspoiled stamps. It is possible. So basically this section used when a person buys stamps but end by not using them. So being an advocate, he buy stamps but by the end of the year he was not using that stamps. So if it is so, then and the stamps are still valid and intact, then the person has no future use for those stamps, then this can be returned. Now moving further, let us see criminal offences and procedures. Chapter 7 deal with this. Section 62 said penalty for executing etc. Instrument not duly stamped. Now if the instrument which are not duly stamped, section 62 subsection 1 is applicable if any person who does the following without a due stamping. What is doing? Executing, drawing, endorse, issue, transfer, or negotiates a will of exchange or promissory note, or execute or he sign any instrument which is chargeable with the duty, or votes or attempt to vote under a proxy not duly stamped, penalty is 500 rupees fine for each offence. And section 62 subsection 2 said special rule for companies. Now if a share warrant is issued without being duly stamped, company and each person who is the managing director, secretary, principal officer shall be liable. Fine is up to 500 rupees. 63 discuss penalty for failure to cancel adhesive stamps. Section 63 impose a penalty on a person who is required under section 12 to cancel an adhesive stamps but fails to do so. He has to be cancel the adhesive stamps. He has to cancel. He has not done. Penalty rupees 100. He shall be liable to a fine which may extend to rupees 100. Section 64 said penalty for omission to comply with 27. So section 27 deal with the fraudulent or negligent behavior in connection with the section 27. So the offence can occur in 3 situations. Clause A said person executing the instrument which is failed to fully and truly disclose the facts, intent to defraud the government must be present, for example underreporting the sale value in the sale deed or to pay lower stamp duty. Clause B said legal draftsmanship, clerk or any person involved in preparing the document neglect or omit to set out the true details. And clause C said any other act calculated to deprive the government for revenue, even if not directed under clause A and B. So penalty, now this is imposing a big penalty. Now penalty is 5,000 rupees. Now because this is on the part negligence on the part of the government official, he is negligent and the penalty is imposed 5,000 rupees. So no imprisonment but a serious monetary deterrent is imposed there. 65 discuss penalty for refuse to give a receipt device to evade duty. So received under section 65 of Stamp Duty Act. We know that this apply to the 2 situations, refusal or neglect to issue a receipt. And if a person required under section 30 to give a receipt of any payment exceeding 20, then the person refuses to neglect to give the receipt, they become liable under this section and they have to repay the fine for that. So if someone pay 500 for a service but the receipt refused to give a stamped receipt, stamp duty is evaded, right? So further, section 66, penalty for not making out policy or making one not duly stamped. Anyone who receive premium or consideration for an insurance policy but fail to make out and execute a duly stamped policy within a 1 month receiving the premium, he has to pay penalty for that. Issue or deals in unstamped policies such as makes execute or deliver a policy not duly stamped or pay or agree to pay money on the basis of unstamped policies. So if an insurer settle a claim or agree to pay money on an insurance policy that was never stamped as per law, then the fine will be imposed of 200 rupees on such default. Section 67 deal with the penalty not drawing full number of bills or marine policy purporting to FinCET. This is a simple provision. You can give a reading into your bare act. So far this section 67 is concerned. Section 68 discusses with the penalty for post-dating bills otherwise and other devices to defraud the revenue. This is also a very simple provision, and there is nothing much to give the interpretation of this section. Please give a thorough reading to section 68. You will understand that what the provision is talking about. And further, 69 discuss the what if penalty for the breach of rule relating to sale of stamps and for unauthorized sale. So unauthorized sale is considered as, this is a violation related to the sale of stamps, including unauthorized sale, breach of the rules of licensed vendors, etc. Further, section 70 discuss the institution and conduct of prosecution. Now it talk about the trial, and section 70 discuss this, the section authorized collector and other authorized officer to institute conduct prosecution for the offense under the Stamped Act. They can take legal action for the violation of the act, such as using unstamped or improperly stamped instrument. Section 71 discuss the jurisdiction of the magistrate. Only a magistrate of a first class can try the offences under this act. And section 72 discuss where the trial will take place. It discuss about the place of trial. So it states that any offence under the act may be tried in the local area where the offence was either committed or the offender is found and the offender reside or does his business. So this is about the Indian Stamp Act 1899. We can conclude that how important is the Indian Stamp Act 1899. It not only regulate and authenticate the validity of the instrument, but it also help the government to generate a revenue and give the legal sanctity to the documents with the stamp duty, which is levied by the document through the Stamp Act of 1899. That's all for the Indian Stamp Act. Thank you so much.